unlimited drama series.
The first thing I noticed when I woke up at 3 in the morning wasn't the sound of my wife Elena stumbling through our front door. It wasn't even the smell of expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine clinging to her clothes. No, what really got my attention was the fact that our pool cleaner was standing in my backyard at 3 a.m., staring directly at my bedroom window with the kind of intensity that makes your blood run cold. I'm Jack Harris, and up until that moment, I thought the worst thing about my marriage was Elena's habit of leaving dirty dishes in the sink for me to clean. Turns out I was thinking way too small. Let me back up a few hours. Earlier that evening, Elena had thrown one of her spontaneous pool parties for her work friends. As usual, I wasn't invited to my own backyard gathering. I spent the night in my workshop, listening to the laughter and gossip floating through the windows while I fixed a broken cabinet door that had been hanging crooked for 3 months. Elena had mentioned it exactly 47 times, but somehow never found the time to actually schedule someone to fix it. "Jack's so handy," I could hear her telling her friends through the thin walls. "He can fix anything except his own attitude." Cue the laughter. Elena's friends loved it when she took shots at me. Made them feel better about their own marriages, I guess. By midnight, the party had wound down, and I'd cleaned up the backyard like always. Empty wine glasses, soggy paper plates, and enough cigarette butts to start a small fire. Elena had disappeared inside with her phone, probably texting someone about how boring her husband was. That's when I'd gone to bed, expecting another night of Elena scrolling through social media until dawn. Instead, I got Mystery Man in my backyard. I pulled on jeans and a t-shirt, grabbed the flashlight from my nightstand, and headed outside. The pool cleaner, Max, I think Elena had said his name was, didn't move when he saw me coming. Just stood there like a statue, hands at his sides. "Little late for pool maintenance, isn't it?" I called out, keeping my distance. He stepped into the light, and I got my first good look at him. Late 20s, maybe early 30s, with the kind of build that suggested he'd done more in his life than skim leaves out of swimming pools. His arms were covered in tattoos, and his eyes had that 1,000-yard stare I recognized from my own mirror on bad days. "Mr. Harris," he said, his accent thick and unmistakably Eastern European, "we need to talk." "About pool chemicals? At 3 in the morning?" He shook his head slowly. "About your wife. About the man she's been seeing. About why you need to get your children out of this house before sunrise." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Who the hell are you?" Without breaking eye contact, Max rolled up his left sleeve. There, in black ink across his forearm, was a detailed military insignia I didn't recognize, with text in what looked like Cyrillic letters below it. "My name is Maxim Ivanenko," he said quietly. "I was Ukrainian Special Forces before I came to America. And the man your wife is sleeping with is not who she thinks he is." The flashlight suddenly felt heavy in my hand. "What are you talking about?" "Viktor Orlov, your wife's boyfriend. He's not a businessman, Mr. Harris. He's a Russian intelligence operative, and your wife has been helping him plan something that will get a lot of innocent people killed." I stared at him for a long moment, waiting for the punchline or the camera crew or whatever was supposed to make this make sense. When nothing happened, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the alternative was screaming. "You're telling me my wife, Elena Harris, who works in HR at a software company and can't figure out how to reset the Wi-Fi password, is some kind of international spy? I'm telling you she's been moving money, providing cover identities, and helping Victor coordinate with sleeper cells in 3 major cities," Max said flatly. "And I'm telling you that if you don't get Sophie and Ben out of here tonight, they're going to become collateral damage when this thing goes sideways." Sophie was 16, sharp as a whip, and the only person in my family who still seemed to actually like me. Ben was 13, awkward and sweet, and asked too many questions for his own good. The thought of either of them getting hurt because of Elena's stupidity made my vision blur red around the edges. "Prove it," I said. Max reached into his jacket, slowly, keeping his hands visible, and pulled out a phone. He scrolled through something, then turned the screen toward me. It was a photo of Elena and a man I'd never seen before, sitting in what looked like an expensive restaurant. Elena was leaning across the table, her hand on his arm, smiling the way she used to smile at me about 15 years ago. The man was tall, dark-haired, probably handsome if you were into the whole dangerous foreigner thing. This was taken 3 days ago, Max said. They've been meeting twice a week for 4 months. Always the same restaurant, always the same corner table, always cash payments. Your wife thinks she's having an affair. Victor thinks he's recruited an asset. They're both right. I stared at the photo until the faces started to blur. How do you know all this? Because I've been watching Victor for 8 months, waiting for the right moment to take him down. Because my government sent me here to stop him before he kills American civilians on American soil. And because your wife just became his biggest liability. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and I didn't like the picture they were making. Elena's new clothes, the mysterious phone calls, the way she'd been staying late at work more and more often, her sudden interest in current events and politics, subjects she'd never cared about before. What's he planning? I asked. Coordinated attacks on soft targets during the Boston Marathon. Bombs, probably. Maybe chemical weapons. Victor's been building a network for 2 years, and Elena's been helping him launder money through her company's accounts. I closed my eyes and tried to process this. When I opened them again, Max was watching me with something that might have been sympathy. Mr. Harris, I need you to understand something. When this operation gets rolled up, and it will probably in the next 24 hours, everyone connected to Victor is going to be considered a threat. That includes your wife and potentially your children. My kids don't know anything about this. It doesn't matter. The people coming for Victor won't take chances. I looked back at the house where Sophie and Ben were sleeping peacefully in their beds, probably dreaming about normal teenage problems like math tests and crushes and whether they'd make the soccer team. They had no idea their mother was apparently an international criminal. What do you want me to do? Get them out tonight. Take them somewhere safe, somewhere Elena can't find them, and keep them there until this is over. And then what? Max's expression hardened. Then we deal with your wife and her boyfriend. I should have called the police right then. Should have demanded more proof, asked more questions, maybe even warned Elena that her secret boyfriend was apparently a terrorist. Instead, I found myself nodding. Give me an hour, I said. Max checked his watch. You have 30 minutes. After that, Victor's going to start wondering why I'm not answering my phone. Your phone? He thinks I work for him, Max explained. Pool cleaner was the perfect cover. Nobody pays attention to the help, and I get access to houses all over the neighborhood. Been feeding him information for months, letting him think he recruited me. But you're actually here to put a bullet in his head and ship your wife off to a very small, very unpleasant federal prison cell. Max's smile was cold as winter. Unless you have a better idea. I looked at the house again, thinking about Elena inside, probably texting Victor about how boring her husband was, how easy it had been to fool me, thinking about Sophie and Ben, innocent in all this, but about to have their lives destroyed because their mother couldn't resist playing spy games with a foreign agent. Actually, I said slowly, I might have a few ideas of my own. Max raised an eyebrow. Such as? Elena always said I wasn't tough enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't man enough to handle the real world. I looked back at him, and for the first time in months, I felt something like confidence settling in my chest. Maybe it's time to prove her wrong. Mr. Harris, this isn't a game. These people are dangerous. So am I said quietly. I did 2 tours in Afghanistan before I became a contractor. I know how to handle dangerous people. Max studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. What did you have in mind? First, I get my kids somewhere safe. Then we have a conversation with my wife and her boyfriend. A very detailed, very honest conversation about their future plans. And after that, I smiled, and it felt like the first genuine smile I'd had in years. After that, we make sure Elena gets exactly what she deserves. 30 minutes later, I was driving through the empty streets of our suburb with Sophie and Ben in the back seat, both of them grumpy and confused about the sudden 3 a.m. evacuation. Dad, this is insane, Sophie said for the fifth time. You can't just drag us out of bed and drive us to Grandma's house because you think there might be a gas leak. The gas company said it was urgent, I lied smoothly. Better safe than sorry. Why didn't Mom come with us? Ben asked, his voice small and worried. She'll catch up later, I said, which was probably true in the most technical sense. My parents lived 20 minutes away in a retirement community that had security gates and nosy neighbors who kept track of every car that came and went. If Elena tried to get to the kids, she'd have to go through a small army of bored retirees with nothing better to do than interrogate visitors. I pulled into their driveway and walked the kids to the front door, where my father was waiting in his bathrobe and slippers, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Jack, what the hell's going on? He asked as Sophie and Ben trudged past him into the house. Family emergency, I said quietly. I need you to keep the kids here for a few days. Don't let Elena take them anywhere, no matter what story she tells you. Elena's their mother, Jack. I can't just... Dad, please. Trust me on this one. Something bad is about to happen, and I need to know Sophie and Ben are safe. He looked at me for a long moment, probably seeing something in my expression that convinced him I wasn't joking around. Finally, he nodded. How bad? He asked. Bad enough that you should probably call in sick to your golf game tomorrow. I hugged my kids goodbye, promised them I'd explain everything soon, and drove back home through the pre-dawn darkness. Max's van was still parked on the street, and I could see him sitting behind the wheel, talking on his phone in what sounded like rapid-fire Ukrainian. I parked in my driveway and walked over to his window. He rolled it down and finished his conversation. Kids are safe? He asked. Safe as I can make them. What's the situation here? Elena came home about 10 minutes after you left. Victor's car is parked 3 blocks away. Black BMW, diplomatic plates. They're both inside, probably wondering where you and the children went. Time to find out, I said. We walked up to my front door together, and I used my key to let us in. The house was dark except for a light in the kitchen, and I could hear Elena's voice coming from that direction, high and worried. I'm telling you, they're not here, she was saying. Jack must have taken them somewhere. Where would he go at this hour? The man's voice was unfamiliar, with the same kind of accent as Max, but somehow smoother, more polished. I don't know. Maybe his parents' house or his brother's place? This is not good, Elena. If your husband suspects something, he doesn't suspect anything. Jack's an idiot. He probably just couldn't sleep and decided to take the kids for a drive. I looked at Max and smiled. She always was good at reading people. We walked into the kitchen together and I got my first look at Victor Orloff in person. He was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, dark, handsome in that generic European way that probably worked well on lonely housewives. He was sitting at my kitchen table, drinking coffee from my favorite mug, looking perfectly at home. Elena was pacing by the window, still in the clothes she'd worn to her pool party. Her hair messed up in a way that suggested she and Victor had been doing more than just talking. They both froze when they saw us. Hello, honey, I said cheerfully. I'd like you to meet my new friend Max. Turns out you two have a mutual acquaintance. Elena's face went white. Victor's hand moved toward his jacket, but stopped when Max casually pulled a gun from somewhere and pointed it in his general direction. Victor Orlov, Max said conversationally. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit terrorism, money laundering, and being an all-around piece of garbage. I want a lawyer, Victor said immediately. I'm not a cop, Max replied. So that's not really how this works. Elena found her voice. Jack, what is this? What's going on? I pulled out a chair and sat down across from her, feeling more relaxed than I had in months. Well, sweetheart, it turns out your boyfriend here isn't actually a businessman. He's a Russian spy, and you've been helping him plan terrorist attacks on American soil. Also, our pool cleaner is actually Ukrainian special forces, which explains why the pool always looked so good. Elena's mouth opened and closed a few times without any sound coming out. Victor just sat there, staring at Max like he was trying to figure out how this had all gone so wrong so quickly. Now, I continued, Max here was planning to just shoot Victor and hand you over to the FBI. But I convinced him that we should have a conversation first. You know, clear the air, discuss your future plans, Maybe figure out how we're going to handle this divorce. Divorce? Elena's voice cracked on the word. Oh, honey. Did you think I was going to stay married to a terrorist sympathizer? I mean, I knew you were cheating. That part was pretty obvious. But I had no idea you'd gone full international criminal. That's new, even for you. Victor finally spoke up. Mr. Harris, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Elena and I are just friends, business associates. Business associates who meet twice a week at expensive restaurants and then come back to my house to have sex in my bed. I shook my head. Victor, I may be just a dumb contractor, but I'm not blind. Max stepped closer to Victor, the gun never wavering. Tell him about the money, Victor. Tell him about the accounts Elena set up at her company. Elena made a choking sound. I don't know what you're talking about. 17 different shell companies, Max continued, all registered through Elena's HR department, all funded through a series of offshore accounts controlled by Russian.
She texted you come back to bed at 3 a.m. Last Tuesday, you told me you were at your sister's.
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
Intelligence. $2.3 million moved through your wife's computer over the past 6 months. I looked at Elena with something like admiration. 2.3 million? Honey, I'm impressed. I never thought you had it in you to steal that much money. I didn't steal anything, Elena snapped, her fear finally giving way to anger. Those were legitimate business transactions. Legitimate business transactions to fund bombing attacks during the Boston Marathon, Max said flatly. We have the communications, Elena. We have the bank records. We have photos of you and Victor meeting with known terrorists in 4 different cities. Elena slumped in her chair, the fight going out of her all at once. I didn't know, she whispered. I thought, Victor said it was just business. Import, export stuff. Import, export, I repeated. What kind of imports, Elena? Bombs? Chemical weapons? Or just regular old-fashioned murder supplies? Victor tried to stand up, but Max gestured with the gun and he sat back down. This is ridiculous. Elena had nothing to do with any operational planning. She was simply helping me establish legitimate business connections. By sleeping with you, our personal relationship is separate from our business arrangement. I laughed, and it came out harder and colder than I'd expected. You know what, Victor? I almost believe you. Elena's always been good at compartmentalizing. She probably convinced herself that helping you launder terrorist money was just a little side hustle, completely unrelated to the fact that she was screwing you behind my back. Elena looked up at me with tears in her eyes. Jack, please. I never meant for any of this to happen. Which part? The cheating, the terrorism, or the part where you got caught? All of it. I was bored, Jack. Bored with our marriage, bored with my job, bored with everything. When Victor came along, he made me feel important, like I mattered. So you decided to help him kill innocent people? I didn't know that's what he was planning. Elena's voice rose to a near shout. He told me he was setting up import businesses. He said the money transfers were for legitimate investments. Victor was watching this exchange with the expression of a man who was rapidly calculating his odds of survival. Elena, I think you should stop talking now. Why? I asked. Because she might say something incriminating? Little late for that, don't you think? Max pulled out his phone and showed it to both of them. This conversation is being recorded. Everything you've said in the last 10 minutes is going straight to the FBI, along with all the evidence we've already collected. Elena's face crumpled. I'm going to prison. Probably, I agreed. The question is for how long, and whether you take Victor down with you or try to protect him. There's nothing to protect him from, Elena said desperately. I told you, I didn't know about any terrorist plot. Victor's expression darkened. Elena, shut up. No, she snapped, some of her old fire returning. I'm not going to prison for you, Victor. If you lied to me about what we were doing, then you can face the consequences by yourself. What were you doing exactly? Max asked quietly. Elena looked back and forth between Victor and me, probably trying to figure out which one of us was more likely to help her. Finally, she focused on Max. Victor said he needed help setting up shell companies to import goods from Eastern Europe. He said American regulations were complicated, and he needed someone who understood corporate structures. I used my access at work to create the companies and set up the bank accounts. And the money transfers? He gave me account numbers and told me how much to transfer and when. I thought it was payment for goods or maybe initial investments in new businesses. $2.3 million worth of initial investments? Elena's voice got smaller. He said he represented a consortium of wealthy Russian businessmen who wanted to establish a presence in American markets. I shook my head. Elena, you work in HR. You're not an investment banker or a corporate lawyer. Didn't it occur to you that maybe you were getting in over your head? Victor said I was smart enough to handle it. He said I was wasted in my current job, that I had the potential to be part of something much bigger. Something much bigger, I repeated. Like terrorism? Like international business, Elena shouted. I thought I was helping legitimate businessmen invest in American companies. Victor finally lost his patience. Elena, you stupid woman, do you have any idea what you've done? The temperature in the room seemed to drop about 10 degrees. Elena stared at Victor like she'd never seen him before. Excuse me? You were supposed to keep your mouth shut and follow instructions. Instead, you've compromised the entire operation with your pathetic need for attention and validation. Pathetic need for attention? Elena's voice was deadly quiet. Did you really think a woman like you could be part of something important? You're a middle-aged suburban housewife with a boring job and a boring husband. You were useful as long as you did what you were told, but now you've become a liability. I winced. Victor, buddy, I don't think you understand how this marriage works. Elena may be a terrorist sympathizer, but she's my terrorist sympathizer, and nobody talks to her like that except me. Elena stood up slowly, her hands clenched into fists. A liability? A stupid, expendable liability, Victor confirmed. Did you think I actually cared about you? Did you think this was some kind of romantic adventure? You were a tool, Elena. A useful idiot who gave me access to American banking systems and corporate structures. Nothing more. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the refrigerator humming in the corner. Elena, I said gently, I think your boyfriend just broke up with you. She turned to look at me, and for the first time in years, I saw the woman I'd married 20 years ago. Angry, fierce, and absolutely done with being underestimated. Max, she said quietly, what do you need to know about Victor's operation? Victor started to protest, but Max gestured with the gun, and he fell silent. Everything, Max said. Names, locations, timelines, methods. All of it. Elena sat back down and folded her hands on the table. Victor's been running 3 separate cells in Boston, New York, and Washington, D.C. The Boston cell has 5 members, including a man named Dimitri, who works as a maintenance supervisor at the marathon finish line. Victor's face went gray. The New York cell is smaller, just 3 people, but they have access to chemical supplies through a legitimate cleaning company. Victor said they were going to coordinate their attack with the Boston bombing to maximize psychological impact. Elena, stop, Victor said desperately. The Washington cell is the largest. 8 people, including someone who works for a catering company that has contracts with several government buildings. Victor showed me photos of their reconnaissance work. Max was taking notes on his phone. What about funding? How are they planning to get the materials they needed? The money I helped transfer was supposed to cover equipment purchases and operational expenses. Victor had detailed budgets for everything. Explosives, vehicles, safe houses, even bribes for local officials. Safe houses? 3 locations in Boston, 2 in New York, 1 in Washington. Victor made me memorize the addresses in case we needed to use them. I stared at my wife with a mixture of horror and admiration. Elena, exactly how deep were you in this thing? Deeper than I realized, she admitted. Victor said I was just handling the financial side, but he kept asking me to do more. Research on security protocols, information about local law enforcement procedures, background checks on potential recruits. Recruits? Other people like me. Americans who could provide cover and support for the operational teams? Victor said the key to successful terrorism was having local assets who could blend in and move freely. Max looked up from his phone. How many other Americans were involved? Elena closed her eyes and thought. At least a dozen that I knew about, maybe more. Victor kept the cells separate, so I only knew the people in my specific area of responsibility. Which was? financial operations, and recruitment support. I helped identify potential assets and provided background information to help Victor determine who could be trusted. The full scope of what Elena had been involved in was starting to sink in. This wasn't just a simple affair with a foreign spy. She'd been part of a major terrorist network, actively helping to plan attacks that could have killed hundreds of people. Elena, I said quietly, do you understand what you've done? She opened her eyes and looked at me. I understand that I've been an idiot. I understand that Victor played me perfectly and I fell for it because I was desperate to feel important. And I understand that I've probably destroyed our family and maybe gotten a lot of innocent people killed. The people aren't dead yet, Max said. If you cooperate fully, we can roll up this entire network before anyone gets hurt. What happens to me? That depends on how much you help and how much damage you've already done. Elena nodded slowly. What do you need me to do? Max looked at Victor, who was sitting in stunned silence, probably trying to figure out how his carefully planned operation had collapsed so completely. First, we need you to contact your handler and tell him everything is proceeding normally. Then we need you to help us set up a meeting with the other American assets. I can do that, Elena said. But Victor will know something's wrong if I'm suddenly asking questions I've never asked before. Victor won't be a problem, Max said grimly. I cleared my throat. Actually, I have a better idea. Both Max and Elena looked at me. Victor here thinks Elena is a stupid, expendable liability, right? And Elena now knows that Victor never cared about her, that this whole thing was just a manipulation from the beginning. So why don't we let them work out their relationship issues while we watch? I bet Victor knows a lot more about this operation than he's admitted, and I bet Elena has a lot more anger than she's expressed. Max smiled slowly. Mr. Harris, I think I'm beginning to understand why your wife underestimated you. What followed was the most educational conversation I'd ever witnessed. Elena, motivated by fury and betrayal, systematically extracted every piece of information Victor had been hiding from her. Victor, motivated by fear and desperation, tried to minimize his role while simultaneously throwing his co-conspirators under the bus. By dawn, we had names, addresses, phone numbers, bank account information, and detailed operational plans for terrorist attacks in 3 major cities. We also had a complete breakdown of the command structure, funding sources, and timeline for the entire network. Max spent most of the morning on his phone coordinating with various federal agencies, while Elena and Victor sat in my living room under armed guard. Elena looked exhausted and defeated. Victor looked like a man who was rapidly calculating how many years he was going to spend in federal prison. Around noon, the FBI showed up. They were polite but thorough, taking Elena and Victor into custody while treating Max with the kind of deference that suggested he was exactly who he claimed to be. They also spent several hours interviewing me, trying to determine how much I'd known about Elena's activities and whether I'd been complicit in any way. The answer, thankfully, was that I'd been completely in the dark until Max filled me in. The FBI seemed satisfied that I was just an innocent bystander who'd gotten caught up in his wife's criminal activities. By evening, it was all over. Elena and Victor were in federal custody, along with most of their network. The planned attacks had been prevented, and Max was presumably on his way back to wherever Ukrainian Special Forces agents go when their missions are complete. I was alone in my house for the first time in 20 years, trying to figure out what came next. The answer came to me 3 days later when Elena's friends started calling. Jenna called first. Jack, I heard Elena was arrested. Is it true she was involved with terrorists? That's what the FBI tells me, I said. But that's impossible. Elena's not smart enough to be a terrorist. I almost laughed. Apparently, she was smart enough to help launder over $2 million and recruit a dozen American assets for a Russian intelligence operation. There was a long pause. Jack, I think there's something you should know. What's that? Elena asked me to help her with some financial transactions a few months ago. She said it was for a legitimate business opportunity, but now I'm wondering, what kind of help? I work for a bank, you know. Elena asked me to expedite some international wire transfers and maybe not ask too many questions about the source of the funds. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Jenna, Please tell me you didn't help Elena launder terrorist money. I didn't know that's what it was. She said it was for an import business her boyfriend was starting. Her boyfriend? That you knew she was cheating on me with? Another long pause. Jack, I'm sorry. I should have told you about Elena and Victor. But she made me promise not to say anything. She said you two were probably going to get divorced anyway, and she didn't want to make things more complicated. More complicated than terrorism? I didn't know about the terrorism. I hung up on her. Allison called an hour later with a similar story. Elena had asked her to use her connections in local government to help Victor obtain various permits and licenses for his businesses. Like Jenna, Allison claimed she'd had no idea what Victor was really planning. Unlike Jenna, Allison seemed more concerned about her own reputation than about the fact that she'd aided terrorists. Jack, you can't tell anyone I helped Elena with this stuff. I'm running for city council next year, and this kind of scandal could ruin my political career. Allison, you helped terrorists obtain official government documents. I think your political career is already over, but I didn't know they were terrorists. You knew Elena was cheating on me with Victor. You knew she was asking you to bend rules and cut corners for a man you'd never met. Didn't it occur to you to ask questions? Elena said Victor was going to invest in local businesses and create jobs. I thought I was helping the local economy. By circumventing normal regulatory processes? By being flexible and business-friendly. I hung up on her too. By